Today I'm going to show you how to recreate my Tinkerbell Gets Hooked makeup tutorial. Starting on the eyes, I'm going to use the Too Faced Born This Way Multitasking Concealer. This is going to neutralise the skin, getting rid of any redness and uneven skin tone. It's also going to work as a base for our eyeshadow. You can blend this in with your fingers, or you can use a brush like I'm doing. This is a full coverage concealer. It's really good at blanking out your skin to give you that neutral canvas to work on. To set that in place, I'm going to use Mercier's translucent powder, and I'm using a fluffy blending brush to push this over the entire eyelid. This is going to remove any tacky residue, leaving a perfect smooth finish for eyeshadow. The first palette I'm going to use is the Shade and Light Eye Palette by Kat Von D. I'm dipping an angled liner brush into the very first brown shade, and we're going to use this to map out our Disney eye shape. I'm creating a wing on the outer edge, and then I'm tracing my natural eye socket about 2mm higher, and that's going to allow us to create a bigger looking eyelid. I'm now taking a pencil brush and I'm running that softly along the line that we've created to blur it out so it looks softer and doesn't look as drawn on. Although we are softening it, we still want that defined shape, so I'm making sure to blend the colour upwards and not downwards. I've now dipped the very tip of my pencil brush into a little bit of the same brown shade that we've used to sketch the shape on, and I'm using that to help blend out that line upwards towards the eyebrow bone. Now what I would say is to be patient here. You do want to keep working your brush backwards and forwards until the line starts to soften. We want to create a nice soft gradient so it looks like a shadow. If you apply too much too soon, it's just going to start to look muddy. So take your time and use a light hand when you're doing this. Once you're happy with your first blend, you then want to go back in with your pencil brush and apply a second layer of the eyeshadow. Applying this in washes of colour is the best way and easiest way to create that nice gradient. Make sure you pour that colour through to the inner corner of the eyes and then follow that nice dipped shape towards the wing. Don't worry too much if you start to lose your shape, because we are going to go in with a concealer, so you do get a second chance to redefine that shape. Here I'm going in with a small crease brush, and I'm using this to blend over the gradient that we've created to make sure it's nice and seamless. Now I'm going to create a bit more dimension, so I'm going back to the Kat Von D palette and my angled liner brush, and I'm dipping that into the black. I'm using this to trace along that socket line that sits a little bit higher than my natural socket, and this is going to work as the darkest area of our shadow. So we're creating an illusion that our socket line is in this area and not actually where it sits slightly lower. I'm going back to my pencil brush and again running that along the line that we've created to start to blur it into the brown that we've already applied below. You never really want to go in with your black first. You always want to create your shadows first and then go in with your defining colour, which in this instance is the black. If you do it the opposite way around, you'll find again it starts to look quite muddy and the black becomes more of a brown rather than a black. You should start to see now that it's looking more like your actual crease line. We're also going to use this on the outer wing to define that shape further. It should look quite theatrical because that's the look that we're going for. Dipping that angled liner brush into the brown, I'm now going to pour that colour onto the eyelid itself along the lash line and keep this to the outer third. Going back to my Born This Way concealer, we're going to use this on a flat brush to cut the crease and make sure it looks that little bit more intense. This is your chance to redefine that shape if you lost it during the blending process. A little tip is to always apply your brush at the highest point and pull your concealer downwards. This will give you quite a defined shape. You can then go along in a slightly soft swiping motion to give you a nice crisp finish. When it comes to the tail of our eye shape, I turn my brush around and use it horizontally to swipe that concealer into the shape that we've created. A little tip when doing this is to rest your arm on a table so that you've got a little bit more precision with your hand. The next eyeshadow I'm going to use is this one by Certifeye, and this is the Dynasty palette. It's such a beautiful palette, and the colour I'm going to use is called Glisten, and it's a shimmery mint green colour. It's really pretty. I'm going to use a flat shaded brush to press this onto the concealer, which we've not set in place, which means that it will give the eyeshadow something to grab onto. You could also use your finger to apply this, which will give a nice colour payoff, but you can be more precise around those sharp defined lines if you use a brush. My preference is a flat shaded brush because you don't lose any of that pigment between the bristles because it's nice and tightly packed together. And again, tip this brush on a horizontal angle to press that colour in on the wing. Over that mint green, we're going to use a glitter glue and we're going to press that on with another flat shaded brush directly over the eyeshadow in a patting motion. Then over there we're taking this Limelight glitter, also by Certifeye, and using that same flat shaded brush we're going to press this directly over the glue, and you're going to repeat the process until you're happy with the coverage and you can no longer feel the wet glue. Next I'm taking this Kohl pencil by ZOEVA, and this is in the shade Karnat, and we're going to fill in the inner corner of our eye around the tear duct area just to make the eye look slightly bigger. Tinkerbell has slightly upturned eyes, so we're going to create that using a lighter shade here on the inner corner paired with that wing on the outer edge. This time taking a black pencil by ZOEVA, we're using this on the waterline on the outer half, and just make sure you lay this a couple of times. To line my top lash line, I decided I would use the ScandalEyes Bold Liquid Liner by Rimmel. Where possible, I wanted to use some affordable products. I do find this liner's good, but it is a little bit wishy-washy, particularly over glitter, so you do need to apply a couple of layers of this, and I don't like the tip that it comes with. For some reason they've made it with a small ball on the end, which makes no sense, so I'm using a paintbrush dipped into the eyeliner to apply this. You can see what I mean by it being wishy-washy here at the tail, because you can slightly see through it. I'm extending the shape of the eye around the tear duct area. Again, this is helping to make the eye look bigger. Notice how the cream eyeliner that we've applied in that tear duct area helps to make the eye look larger. You could use white here, but I find it to be a bit too stark. That's why I've gone with a cream shade. Dropping this area at the front with the eyeliner helps with that upturned Tinkerbell eye. I'm now popping some wispy eyelashes on. These are quite spiky and they are by Velour Eyelashes. So this is my hook that Gorilla Props kindly made me. As you can see, it's flipping awesome, but we need to cut it into two sections so that we've got a small sharp pointy hook to come out of our cheek, and then we can hold the other half underneath our jaw. Before I do the rest of the face makeup, I need to draw around the areas that we're going to be applying the hook. So we're making it appear as though it's gone underneath our jaw, around our teeth and out of our cheek. So I'm going to take a face liner pencil by Krylon, and I'm going to use this to draw around the small section of the hook on the top half of our cheek. This is very similar to my Cinderella look with the heel coming out of the cheek, which I will link in the description bar, and before anyone claims that I copied Glam & Gore, my looks came out as images the year before she debuted her looks. It's sad that I even have to mention it, but I have to because I get so much abuse, but I will link the proof below for you. So moving on, I have lined around the top section and I'm now making sure that the placement is correct so it looks nice and symmetrical before lining around the hook underneath my jaw. Although we won't be sticking this on underneath our jaw, we will be holding it in place for photos, so we need to make sure it's in the right area. I'm now taking witch hazel, which is an astringent, and this is going to remove any oils from the skin. So I'm cleaning on the inside and around the outside of our guide. I like to do this after I've drawn around my guide, as I don't like to put this on all of my skin if I can help it. So I'm going to finish the other side of my face. I'm using this cream contour by Mascara Beauty, and this is the shade Stone, and I'm using this to contour the cheeks and also the temple area of my eye. And I've already applied a light layer of the Armani Luminous Silk Foundation to the bottom half of my face. I'm not worried too much about the top of my forehead because I'm going to be applying a fringe. To add a little bit more coverage, I'm using the Mercier Flawless Fusion Concealer, and then I'm pressing that into the skin with a sponge. To give the cheeks a bit of a Disney flush, I'm using this one by Rimmel. It's a maxi blush in the shade Third Base, and I'm using this over the apples of the cheeks, and I'm building that up until I get a nice rosy glow. To add a subtle highlight to the skin, I'm using Becca's Champagne Pop on the inner corners of the eyes, down the nose and across the cupid's bow. Now some of you might be thinking, I can see sculpture on your cheeks and I've missed what's happened. Don't worry, you haven't missed it, it's coming up in a moment. I decided I wasn't happy with it, so I took it off and redid it. So to start with, I'm taking some Ben Nye Spirit Gum from the Makeup Armoury and I'm applying this to the inside of our guide on the cheek. You want to leave that to go tacky. I tend to apply my prosthetic up and down until it forms tiny little sticky strings. You can then apply your prosthetic or your piece. To build up the skin around the prosthetic, I'm using Sculpt Gel, which I also got from the Makeup Armoury, and you mix parts A, B and C together. C is your softener, it's the part that gives you the flexibility, so you only need a very small amount of this. I'm using a metal spatula to apply the Sculpt Gel mixture onto both the skin and over the lip of the hook. I always hold my spatula at a slight angle when I apply the Sculpt Gel because I want it to be seamless with the skin, but also so it lifts upwards, because the hook is supposed to look like it's protruding through the skin, so this gives us the most realistic finish. But don't worry about getting it perfect straight off. You have a little bit of working time with this. Get the sculpt gel on first, completely coat around the entire area of the hook, and then using your spatula at an angle you can start to smooth the sculpt gel down into the skin so it looks nice and seamless. Your working time with this really does depend on the temperature of the room that you're in. Sometimes I have around sort of 3 to 5 minutes, other times I've had up to 10 minutes before it goes off. It also depends on how much softener you've applied to the product as well. I'm now using my spatula to drag some of that sculpt gel up onto the hook itself to make it look as if the skin is split, so as though some of the skin is torn and still hanging onto the hook. I use the spatula to create texture in the sculpt gel by dabbing it up and down, so up close it looks as though there's like fat sections in the skin. I'm now going around the very outer edge in one smooth motion. This creates a bit more of a hole to the skin, and so that little textured area on the hook itself is slightly different to the skin surrounding it. As the sculpt gel starts to cure, I use the tip of my spatula to go in and clean up areas, making the slivers of skin look more defined. When you first mix up the sculpt gel, it can be a little bit difficult to work with in terms of creating shape, but as it cures it's easy to manipulate. While that cures, I'm going to put on my fringe, which I got off of eBay, and this one is the same one that I used for my Cinderella hairstyle. When you turn it over you can see it's got a little mesh panel with 2 grips on, which you put onto the crown of your head and then press them into place and the fringe stays put. The difference for wearing this between Tinkerbell and Cinderella is that I sweep the fringe over to the side for Tinkerbell and apply a little green ribbon, and I wear my hair in a bun as opposed to a roll, but you can check out the Cinderella hairstyle in my Cinderella tutorial. The green ribbon came with my Pretty Pixie costume from Leg Avenue. For the lips I'm using the Sweet Peach Cream Peach Lip Oil by Too Faced, and the shade I'm using is Pure Peach and it's a peachy pink shade. I love how this adds vibrancy to the skin and it really complements the green shades. We're now going to paint the wound, and I'm using the Skin Illustrator palettes. These are brilliant because they're alcohol based, so it means that once they're on your skin they're not coming off unless you use a remover. So if you go out with this and it starts to rain, you don't have to worry about the paint coming off like you would with water based paints. I've mixed up some flesh tones from the flesh tone palette and I'm using that to go over the entire surface of the sculpt gel. Now I'm going to mix up some different coloured blood tones to add this into the textured area that we've created on the hook itself. Also, I purchased some contact lenses from Mesmerize, which I've popped in, and these ones are the blue sapphire lenses, but what I will say is I wasn't happy with them. They were comfortable, but I got 2 different colours. So one eye looks like I've got a brownie blue eye and one eye looks like I've got a blue eye. So I got the whole David Bowie thing going on. So anyway, I'm taking some of that same blood tone and I'm painting that directly onto the hook itself and also the tip to bloody it up to make it look like it's come through the skin. So I'm using one tone at the moment. I've applied that around the textured area and on the hook, and I'm going to use what's left on the brush to tap that onto the outer half where the cheek protrudes upwards. Although we want it to be realistic, it is Halloween, so we do want it to be a little bit more gory than it might actually look if it was real. So that's why I'm tapping it around the cheek area, making this area look a little bit red and as if the blood's kind of migrated and this whole area looks generally pretty angry. You don't need to apply any sculpt gel underneath your chin because the hook would have gone inwards, so the skin would have been tucked up. Instead we're going to paint the whole black, and then this will be your guide as to where to put the bottom half of the hook when you're posing for photos or walking around. Around the outer perimeter we are going to apply the same sort of red tones that we applied to the cheek and pat that in with your finger to create a slightly mottled finish, as though the blood's all rushed to the surface, and you want to have this underneath your runny blood so that it all still looks red and aggressive if the runny blood disappears throughout the night. You may want to keep putting your hook there to see how much more you need to apply to your neck to see what's visible once your hook's in place. I'm now painting those same colours onto the bottom half of the hook around the area that's going to be applied to the neck. I'm painting it on with a brush and then using my finger to dab over it so it doesn't have any brush stroke marks. Also putting the hook in place so you can see how much of it's on show, because you might need to take that blood a little bit further down, which I'm doing now. I'm going to be taking 2 different types of bloods from Vermilion Effects. I got these from the Makeup Armoury. The first one I'm going to be using is more of a wound filler. It's slightly darker and thicker in consistency, so we're using this around the base of the wound. And I'm using my spatula to push this into those little crevices that we've created. so it looks deep and thick and clotted. Then I'm also spreading some of that onto the base of the bottom half of the hook. This part is always my favourite because I feel like this is when it all starts to look a little bit more gory and interesting and a bit fun. The second blood I'm taking is slightly lighter in colour. It's thinner in texture, but it's more like elastic, and it allows you to coat the surface with this kind of wet, sticky looking blood. You can also use it to create stringy blood, so it looks as though it's congealed and hanging down and just gives that more realistic finish. I really like this blood. The great thing about using a spatula is you can smear the blood, but you can also use a sort of tapping motion to create those strings. Next I'm going to take another blood by Vermilion SFX from the Makeup Armoury, and this one is a runny blood. These kind of runny bloods often come in a couple of shades. You normally get a light one and a darker one. This one gives you the appearance of flowing blood from a fresh injury. This is kind of more my favourite one, when you want that kind of wet effect to a wound. A bit like when you get a burn and it's just got that kind of glistening blood. There's an even lighter shade that you can use. But I believe this one is Vermilion's lighter shade, but you can get a deeper one called Oxblood. So I've dripped this down from the neck wound and then wiped that around so it's not dripping down onto my costume, and then I've also tapped some of that onto the cheek. My amazing outfit is from Leg Avenue. It's their Pretty Pixie costume and it comes with wings, which you can see on the left, and I will link the costume below. But for this one I wanted to use these amazing wings I had made by a lady called Zoe. I found her on Etsy and I will link her below. These are the large iridescent adult fairy wings and they go so amazing with my outfit. She also makes smaller ones for children or if you just want a smaller pair. So if you're looking for an idea for Halloween, why don't you guys Tinkerbell and let your partner go as Hook and you can pose together for photos. It would look so epic. I really hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. All the products used, the outfit and the wings will all be listed and linked below. Thank you to the brands that helped me to be able to produce this. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below and I'll do my best to get back to you. If you'd like to follow me outside of YouTube, my social handles are on screen. Please subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I will see you next week for some more Halloween tutorials. Bye!